These are the top 5 gaming ultrawides. Let's jump right into that number 5 spot, but if at any point during the video you want to check out any of the 5 monitors in this video, there's Amazon links below for the US, UK, Canada, and international links. But let's jump in to that number 5 spot, which is the Gigabyte M34WQ. This thing comes in at only $500, which is very budget for a gaming ultrawide. Now starting it off, all of the monitors on the list are 34 inches with a resolution of 1440p, ultrawide 1440p, so you're gonna get a PPI or pixels per inch of about 109, so the image is gonna be nice and crisp and clear. So all of those have the same resolution and size, so we are not going to go over that with any more of the monitors because they're all the same. Now this is the only non-curved ultrawide on the list. However, it is incredibly budget for one reason, and that reason is this is an IPS panel. An ultrawide IPS panel at this price point is incredibly rare. Because it's an IPS panel, the colors are good and the viewing angles are perfect. So that means if you go side to side, up and down, there's not gonna be any color shift, there's not gonna be any washing out. Now this hits 144 Hertz and it does have FreeSync Premium and it is compatible with G-Sync, not certified, but it is compatible with G-Sync if you are using a DisplayPort cable. Now brightness is good, but not quite as good as others on the list. During testing, this came in a little bit below the advertised at 340 nits. Now this still is a good brightness, and this is still brighter than a lot of monitors. However, compared to the other ones on the list, it's a little bit less bright. That being said, again, IPS at that $500 price point. Now colors are good, covering 91% of the DCI-P3 color space, and this can output 10 bits of color using FRC or frame rate control. Now, the colors are good here. And because it's an IPS, they're gonna be a little bit more vibrant than something like a VA panel. And that's just real world situational use. But the contrast ratio is typical for IPS panels. That's the biggest drawback for IPS panels at only 1000:1. That means the blacks are really not gonna be totally black like a VA panel, are gonna be quite a bit deeper. So these are gonna be a little bit lighter of a black, kind of like a gray. That being said, the thing that brings this back up is the response time and ghosting. This has essentially no ghosting. Now, when you compare it to a high-end LG monitor, and there is one of those on this list, the LG monitors do ghosting better than everyone else in the industry, period. They just do it the best. However, this is damn close to that. And if you compare this to a VA panel, even really nice VA panels like the ones on this list, this will still be better than that. So that is great for fast-paced gamers. Now, the last thing is the stand and build quality. It is quite good. The stand has tilt, height, and it even has swivel, which is nice. And the stand overall is a very low to the desk, so you can actually still use it as desk space, as well as it being quite stable on the desk. But let's move on to the number 4 spot. And that is the ASUS VG34VQL1B, coming in at $530. Still very budget, and this is now a curved VA panel. Now colors are good on this, but the contrast ratio is absolutely fantastic. Blacks are super deep. That's the biggest change from the last monitor. But the viewing angles on a VA are not as good as an IPS, which are basically perfect. So the VA panels are not gonna be like TNs and have really bad color shift. However, if you move side to side closer to the edge, you are gonna get a little bit of washing out. It's really not that big of a deal, and I don't really ever notice it when using a VA panel. I've used VA panels every day as my daily driver, as well as IPS panels every day as my driver. And there is a difference, but it's not too big, and I don't think the color shift is too big of a deal, especially because with ultrawides, you're typically always in that center. Now this does hit 165 Hertz with FreeSync Premium and G-Sync compatibility, which is great. Now brightness is fantastic. It bumps it up here to 550 nits and SDR content. That is a whole lot of brightness. So the brightness is not only good if you're in a bright room, but it's the vibrancy of the panel. The brightness plays a big part into that. And this thing is just absolutely beautiful. Colors aren't the best, but they are good, covering 90% of the DCI-P3 color space. But again, like I said, that contrast ratio at 4,000:1 is fantastic. The blacks are nice and deep. Night Scenes looks absolutely fantastic as far as how deep those blacks are, or all of the grays, all of the dark tones look fantastic. And this is the biggest edge up that VA panels have over IPS panels, but now we're going to talk about the other side of it, the response time and ghosting. We're kind of going backwards from the last one that we did. Contrast ratio wasn't as good, response time and ghosting was fantastic. This one has a little bit of a downside, and that's why it's at number 4 spot. Still a great monitor, but VA panels struggle with ghosting. Now this one, in a direct test of ghosting, it actually performs really well, like very well. One of the best VA panels that I've used. However, when actually gaming, there is ghosting, but it's not in a typical form. It's actually red and green ghosting. This is essentially where the red and green elements, the red and green colors from your image or game or whatever you're doing will separate and have that ghosting effect. But this is not noticeable in daytime games, like in daytime scenarios. But if you get in more night scenes or night missions, the red and green ghosting is quite noticeable. Now, I have that on my unit. However, I've heard that some people don't have this at all. So I don't know if this is just a quality control issue. I'm not really sure about that. I have also seen this on a few other VA panels before, so I'm not sure exactly how common this is, but it is definitely noticeable. Now, stand and build quality are quite good. Very strong stand. It does have height adjustability, tilt, and it even has swivel, which is fantastic. But let's move on to the number 3 spot. This is where it starts to get really, really good. This is the LG 34950G-B. This thing comes in at almost $1,300, so it is premium. This is not at the number 1 spot, but it is the best ultrawide on the list for sure. It's not the best in value, and that's why it's not at the number 1 spot, but if you do have the money and you want the best of the best gaming ultrawide out there, this is absolutely it. Now, obviously this is curved and this is using LG's Nano IPS panel. Colors are insanely vibrant and viewing angles are obviously perfect. Now, this hits 144 Hertz, but it has a factory overclock up to 180 Hertz, which is freaking awesome. This also has G-Sync Ultimate. This isn't G-Sync compatibility, this is full G-Sync Ultimate. That is absolutely awesome. Now let's move on to brightness. That's another thing where this thing excels heavily. The HDR is fine, it's cool, but the SDR is where it's really at. This thing consistently hits over 500 nits of brightness in SDR content. That is huge. But beyond this, this also has local dimming, which is something that's rarely seen only in higher end monitors, which this is. It's a very high end monitor. This has local dimming with 53 zones. Now, it doesn't make the biggest difference in the world. However, as we know, IPS panels do struggle with that contrast ratio. So even though the contrast ratio is still not like a VA panel, it does take down those blacks noticeably, not a ton, right? It's not the biggest change in the world. However, you can notice that the blacks are deeper in game, and that's just a nice little cherry on top. Now, colors are absolutely fantastic, covering 98% of the DCI-P3 color space. And not just that, but the fact that from the factory, it is calibrated, and at that, calibrated basically perfectly. So your accuracy out of the box is fantastic. You can also do photo, video editing on this monitor, besides just really color accurate and beautiful gaming. And as well, like basically all the other monitors on this list, it uses frame rate control to then output 10 bits of color, which is great. Now, response time and ghosting. This hits 1 milliseconds, gray to gray response time. And obviously, this is LG. They do the best possible tuning for ghosting in the industry. There's basically no ghosting on this. Even in fast-paced games, even if you're a pro, you are not going to notice this ghosting at all. This is the best ghosting on the list, tied with the number 1 spot. Really quite amazing. Stand and build quality are great here with a very premium, nice looking stand that has height adjustability and tilt adjustability. No swivel here. None of the LG ones really have swivel. However, what it does have is RGB built into the back of it. Now, some monitors have RGB and it's kind of just gimmicky. This one actually shines against the wall. If you're in a dimmish or darkish room, this will glow the entire wall up, which is freaking awesome. It's a small thing, but it's a cool thing. Moving on to the number 2 spot, this is the Dell S3422DWG. This thing comes in at 500 bucks. It is a VA panel, and it is my favorite and most recommended VA ultrawide gaming monitor. Colors are nice and vibrant, and obviously the contrast ratio is fantastic. Now, this hits 144 Hertz, but does have a factory overclock up to 160 Hertz. Now, this also is NVIDIA certified G-Sync compatible, which is good. Now, the only real downside to this monitor is it doesn't quite hit its advertised brightness. It is really sticking around about 365 nits. That being said, even in SDR, it only hits around 365 nits. That is still a good brightness, but it's not amazing. In HDR, it goes up to a whopping 520 nits. And on this monitor, I used HDR quite a bit while gaming. So brightness overall is great for me. When I'm typically gaming, I'm gonna turn this thing on HDR and it looks absolutely beautiful. When I'm not gaming, I turn it back and it's a great brightness for everyday work or use or school or whatever I'm doing. Now, this covers 90% of the DCI-P3 color space. And like all the other monitors on the list, this uses frame rate control to output 10 bits of color. Now, like I said, the contrast ratio is fantastic. It's a VA panel at 3000 to 1:1, so the blacks are gonna be nice and deep. Now this has a 2 millisecond gray to gray response time, but the ghosting is where this thing excels far better than all the other VA panels. So typically VA panels, like we've talked about, have had pretty bad ghosting. They always struggle with ghosting. This one is tuned basically perfectly. It has the lowest ghosting I've ever seen on any VA panel, and it does not have any of that red and green ghosting or anything like that. If you guys want to have that lower price point where it's at 500 bucks and you're gonna go for a VA panel because there's really no good IPSs at that price range that are curved. The only really good one is that Gigabyte one that I talked about at the beginning in that number 5 spot. But being a VA panel, 500 bucks, this thing is the best VA gaming panel out there. Standard build quality is also quite good with height adjustability and tilt. You also get a teeny bit of rotation to kind of just like center it if your desk is a little bit off. But now moving to the number 1 absolute best spot for the best value and overall best gaming ultrawide. This is the LG 34GP83AB coming in at 800 bucks. You get a ton for your money. This is obviously a curved panel and it is an IPS panel, so you get fantastic colors and you get perfect viewing angles. This is also the monitor that is right back there. That is the monitor that I use every single day. I think for the value, for the money, it is perfect. It hits 144 Hertz with FreeSync Premium Pro as well as NVIDIA certified G-Sync. Now brightness is absolutely fantastic, hitting well above its advertised at 450 nits in typical SDR content and a whopping 570 nits in HDR content. That is a ton of brightness. I love it. Now colors are great, just like the GP950, covering 98% of the DCI-P3 color space, and like that other monitor, this one comes factory calibrated, so the accuracy out of the box is fantastic. This can also be used for photo and video editing as well as some awesome gaming, which is actually what I use it for. And obviously this can also output 10 bits of color using FRC. Contrast ratio is typical for IPS panels at 1001. That's the only thing that you're going to compromise on this monitor. Response time and ghosting is perfect like you expect. Ghosting as low as you can get, just like the GP950. That's why the GP950 is great if you have the money, but this one is almost what that one is, but for 500 bucks less. The build quality and stand are also quite good, looking very pretty and also having tilt and height adjustability with a tiny bit of rotation, again, to level it if your desk is a little bit off. But overall, for 800 bucks, that is absolutely my favorite monitor on the list for absolute amazing value and a fantastic monitor to use every single day. Again, if you want to check out any of the 5 monitors on this list, there's Amazon links below for the US, UK, Canada, and international links. Any of these 5, I've used them every single day. I've used each one of these as my daily driver, and the one that I use all the time is that number 1, which is back there right now. Any of the 5 are absolutely fantastic, so any of them would be a fantastic pickup. Each one is for a different person in the price range, right? So there's a bunch of different options there, but again, the most recommended one is that last one. It is basically perfect for the price, amazing value. But again, this was Type C Tech Reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next video.